In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, hello everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the Facts series in which we discuss international political matters every week. This is Foad Mahdavi, and in this episode I have the honor of being the host of Geoffrey Young, a political activist from the US. We are here to discuss the critical situation in the United States and the reasons for this deterioration. Thank you for joining us, Geoffrey, and good to be with you.
Thank you. It's nice talking with you.
Thank you very much. Let's get started with the U.S. civil protest, actually. As reported in the world media, the United States is experiencing dire conditions that have been symbolized by civil protests in the United States. What is the root of those popular protests? Go ahead.
There are several causes for the large demonstrations in many U.S. cities. One of them is police brutality, which has existed in the United States for many, many years, many decades. I lived through the 1960s, where many of the demonstrations were directed against the Vietnam War. And at that time, the police forces in this country, including the FBI, conspired to destroy that anti-war movement. So now most of the demonstrations are directed against the police for their harsh treatment of people of color. And that has aroused a great many Americans of all races to protest. Almost always the protesters are peaceful, but sometimes violence occurs, and some of that violence, I know for a fact, is caused by police infiltrating the movement and making the situation more violent than it would have been. Also, the police themselves are almost always the first institution to initiate violence. So most of the violence is caused by the police or by agents provocateurs within the movement for reform, who are creating violence because a police state finds it very easy to suppress violence. If the demonstrators are violent, they almost always are defeated by the more extreme violence exercised by the state. So the police state here in the United States has an interest in seeing violent protests. Now, another cause of the recent demonstrations is the collapse of the United States economy. Unemployment has soared. There have been 40 million more claims for unemployment in the past couple of months because of the shutdowns of the economy related to the coronavirus. The United States has done a very poor job at handling the epidemic or pandemic. So people are out of work, they're desperate, they have no income, very little income, and so the willingness to demonstrate has gone up because of people's loss of economic wealth, loss of income.
Another part of my talk is about the reaction of American political system to the civil protest has led to the claim of American democracy in critical situation to be judged by different societies. What is your assessment of this hostile reaction of the U.S. government?
Well, the United States political scene is dominated by two establishment parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. And since 2016, when there was the election in which Donald Trump unexpectedly won, it has become more and more clear that the two parties are not very different. They are both dedicated to serving the wealthy, serving America's oligarchs, our billionaires. Their only difference is, they're both dedicated to aggressive, hostile foreign policy against any country that defies the United States. The United States has the only empire, worldwide military empire, that exists today. Other countries have significant military forces, but they're mostly defensive. And the United States is the only major imperialist power that still exists. Other NATO countries, their empires have all declined, but the United States empire is still very powerful. And so both major parties in this country support empire and imperialism. They support endless wars. The war in Afghanistan has been the longest war in the United States history, and it shows no sign of ending, even though some politicians have called for the United States to withdraw all our troops from Afghanistan, and from Iraq for that matter. The government has refused. The military-industrial complex, which dominates U.S. politics, along with the mass media corporations, supports empire. And so the two major parties are united in that. They differ in superficial ways. The Democrats try to pretend that they are more liberal, and the Republicans, frankly, call for more repression. So they're not pretending anything. The Republicans actually favor a police state. President Trump recently tweeted that he was going to send the U.S. military to cities where there are demonstrations. That's completely illegal and unconstitutional. But and the U.S. military did a very unusual thing. They said, no, we're not willing to do that. So they publicly said, no, Mr. President, that's not going to happen. So that's a very unusual occurrence. Usually the president and the military are unified in taking aggressive actions in other countries, and here for that matter. There's one small example where the military refused to go along with it.
As you hint to the American police brutality that has been the starting point of this demonstration, let us know about this reality that compared to other countries, the United States has the highest homicide rate by police. Are there any justification for this behavior against the people?
No, there's no justification for police violence against peaceful demonstrators. There's simply no justification for it. All they want to do is preserve their power, and when the ruling elite in the United States feel threatened, they have a number of tools. Their main tool is propaganda. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to attend MIT in 1970s, and I took a couple of classes with Noam Chomsky, where I learned that the FBI, for example, is America's political police force. When things get out of hand, in their view, they'll send in the FBI to infiltrate popular movements and, if necessary, to destroy them. They murdered some of the Black Panthers in Chicago, for example, in, I think it was 1968. So the state has a long, shameful history of violent repression when propaganda temporarily fails. But the main method of control of the population used in modern democracies is propaganda. The media corporations, there are now only 5 of them, the large ones, plus the public broadcasting system, and they all promote imperialism. They distract the public with entertainment, and their main purpose is to keep the population from demanding fundamental changes. So force, when they have to use force, it means they're desperate. Usually they depend on the mass media corporations, which are highly tied into the government. And for example, the Washington Post is partly owned and largely controlled by the CIA. That's illegal too. The CIA is not supposed to conduct operations in the United States, but they do. Ever since they were founded in 1947, the CIA is probably the most powerful terrorist organization in the world.
Actually, racism is one of the significant issues that seems is tied to American history. What do you think is the origin of this sort of behavior on behalf of the U.S. administration?
Right.
What is the origin of this racism behavior?
Well, slavery, I guess. It all goes back to slavery. Before the United States broke away from Britain in the late 1700s, slavery was legal. And then for many years, until the U.S. Civil War in 1850, slavery was legal in about half of the states. And so when you enslave someone, you have to be a racist. You have to dehumanize them in some way. Because there can be no moral justification for slavery, and that is the root, the historical root of racism in America today. We've never solved the racism problem. In the 1960s and early 1970s, that got a lot better with the civil rights movement. But racism has never disappeared from the United States or the colonies.
Among those killed by American police, there is a very high and asymmetric percentage of blacks in comparison to whites. Is there because of the same racist system, or is it the crime rate higher among black Americans?
I don't think the crime rate is higher among black Americans. I think it's a lot of police departments are institutionally racist. They decide which crimes to focus on. They usually focus on street level crimes, and they tend to ignore so-called white collar crime committed by people in the middle class and the wealthy. White collar crime is rampant, and it's not even detected. I ran for office. I'm currently a candidate for the US House of Representatives in Kentucky. And I was a Democrat, but I found that party was so corrupt that in July of 2019 I switched. I'm now a Republican running in the primary. Primary will occur in less than 2 weeks in Kentucky on June 23rd, and I'm one of 3 Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
The incumbent, Andy Barr, is an imperialist. He's a neocon, which means he believes that the United States has the right to attack any country in the world. And he recently introduced a bill to increase sanctions on China and to blame China for the coronavirus, which is scientifically inaccurate. It's foolish. And so we have a neocon, and I'm running against him. And I'm finding that the Republican Party is as corrupt as the Democratic Party. They do not allow challengers to do very well. They never debate. There are no debates in America, or in Kentucky anyway. It doesn't happen. Even the public TV station refused to invite me and the other Republican to debate against Andy Barr. They allowed him only to speak for 18 minutes, and the other Republican and I got 0 minutes. So they're still rigging elections. They claim to be a democracy or a democratic republic, and it just isn't true. It's rigged, and so no real opposition in politics is allowed to form. No, do you have any other topics? I mean, I have a question for you. A friend of mine said, ask them about the MEK and U.S. former Senator
I have no idea
Robert
about
Torricelli. Do you have anything you can tell me about that? Oh, okay, all right. Well, the MEK is I guess they're Iranians, but they operated in Iraq. It's basically a terrorist organization. So look them up. Mujahideen Iqal.
I'll look it up.
Does that ring a bell? Anyway, they've actually been supported by the United States. I believe the CIA works with them.
I have no idea about this, but let's keep up the rest of the interview. Okay, actually, I have another question about the American police. We are in a fucking situation about the American police situation in America. It is very rare for the American police to be reprimanded or prosecuted. This actually exacerbated police violence in the United States. How do you assess this supportive approach on behalf of the U.S. government in favor of the American police?
Well, again, the main mechanism of repression is the media corporations. But when they fail, when public demonstrations occur anyway, the police is the second line of defense, and they simply want to resist any changes to the system. The basic demand of the demonstrators now is to, one, reduce or eliminate military equipment being transferred from the U.S. military to police forces. Police are not supposed to need tanks or armored personnel carriers to fight crime, and to increase community control over police forces everywhere, in every city, so that they become less of an occupying force and become more dedicated to what their role should be, which is protecting public safety. The police are the second line of defense.
At the end, if you would like to add something more, I'm all ears.
Well, I guess what I'd like to say is there's a tremendous amount of China propaganda
I would like to know
in the United
about
States
your perspective of it.
for
How do you
years.
assess the outcome of this critical circumstance that has taken place in the United States? Explain it, and then if you want to say something more. What is your prediction?
I don't know what the outcome will be. I guess that depends on political activists.
Okay, great.
I try never to make predictions. I was saying that there's an intense propaganda campaign against China, against Iran, against Russia. In 2016, Russia and Vladimir Putin were blamed for interfering with the US elections. There was no evidence for that. So I think that the US hostility against Iran and China and Russia and other countries is completely unjustified. We should not, if I ever get elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, I will try to stop the hostility against countries that have not harmed us. And as far as I can tell, Iran is one of those countries that has not attacked the United States. I propose getting all of our troops out of the Middle East, which I understand is a demand of the Iranian government. I support that demand.
Okay, great.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for joining us again. And I do appreciate due to your noteworthy remarks. And I hope things are going well with you and your work, far away from anything negative. Thank you and goodbye.